Most people like me, we have these dreamlike fascinations. But as we get older, we start to repress these fascinations and try and fit into the shoes of society. So why am I telling you this? Because most people aren't aware how they themselves are holding themselves back from a future they want. They don't know that once they embrace those parts of themselves that they've repressed, that they can actually get ahead of 99% of other people. Now, this reason is kind of dark, but it is the reason I think most people don't actually succeed in their life. For example, ever since I've become aware and embraced everything I've been repressing, my entire life has changed. I never have to work for anybody ever again. I'm no longer chasing a career that doesn't resonate with me. I no longer care what other people think of me. I no longer have resentment towards my family and friends. I no longer have a pornography addiction, and now I'm able to commit to things. I'm less aggressive. I'm social again. I actually care and want to help other people. I'm dating. I'm making money. I feel like I actually have a purpose, and I feel like I'm attaining something dreamlike. After years and years of self-reflection, I have finally found the secret. So let's start to dive into the secret that only a little bit of people have really gotten into. The first thing we need to understand when it comes to the shadow is the law of repression. You and I have crafted an image of ourselves that is far greater than reality. We hide our flaws and our unique fascinations just to blend in with society and the norms. But just like me, glimpses of these repressed thoughts and actions and beliefs and behaviors leak out. For some people, it's through passive aggressive behavior, and for people like myself, it's entire career paths. For example, me wanting to be a doctor when in reality, I wanted to pursue my musical interests. The Swiss psychologist Carl Jung called the groups of these repressed behaviors the shadow. And depending on how deep someone's behaviors or actions have been repressed, the darker and more complex their shadow is. So let's go over a few characteristics of the shadow so we can better understand it. You may find yourself contradicting your actions and beliefs. Perhaps you're having random emotional outbursts, or maybe you project your insecurities or beliefs on a particular person or group of people. You could even be glorifying yourself as someone untrue. Maybe you have addictions or passive aggressive behavior. Maybe you have resentment towards the world or towards others. You have a tendency to desire or manipulate others, and maybe you're hyper competitive. You see, the shadow is filled with envy, guilt, fear, disgust, trauma, compassion, humility, greed, hate, aggression, and any other thing that may be deemed unacceptable to not only society, but to your own personal morals and values. All these repressed emotions and behaviors you engage in is what make up the shadow. And this brings up the whole talk of a shadow career. For example, ask yourself why you're pursuing X endeavor, why you're pursuing the things you're pursuing. But try to answer this metaphorically. For instance, why does a drug addict chase drugs? Is it for a greater feeling? Is it to numb himself from the pains of reality? Is it because he never got to live the life of a chaotic rock star and chases that feeling through drugs instead? You see, someone like myself may repress a certain desire, like me wanting to achieve something great through my musical interests. But then I switched over to becoming a doctor, which is also trying to achieve something great. But this isn't truly what I wanted to do at the time. So if you're asking yourself why you're pursuing X and you find yourself rationalizing your pursuits like I did, for example, like being a doctor makes good money, it will help me pay rent, my parents will be proud of me, I'm already committed, this degree will find me a job, whatever. I'll be glad to tell you that you're living a shadow life. You're filled with fear, and it's resulting in you pursuing something meaningless, something that isn't actually true to who you are. And those genuine true desires will leak out in a dark way. Everything you do outside of what you should be doing is cope or like a substitute for what you actually should be doing, if that makes sense. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Many men chase wealth because they believe women will like them for money. They think that wealth will improve their ability to interact with women. But in reality, these men fear learning how to talk to women, so they go and chase money instead. This is cope. This is an example of a substitute. So now that you know the characteristics of the shadow and how you could be living a shadow life, we need to talk about shadow integration. This is how you live a peaceful life and get ahead of 99% of people. So the law of conservation states that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, but it can change from one form to another. This relates to the shadow because you can never fully replace your shadow and dark traits. It's always going to find a way to leak out in your everyday life. Carl Jung believed that the only way for a human to reach true enlightenment, to reach one's highest form of potential, was by incorporating elements of the shadow into the rest of your personality. So in other words, you can't destroy the shadow, but you can integrate it. So let's go over what an improper shadow integration looks like, aka how everyone else is living their life. So we've been integrating our shadow since we were kids. At that time, our shadow traits were simply just traits of our personality. They were just regular parts of who we were. They weren't bad or good. We were just perfectly integrated. But due to social conditioning and us repressing our behaviors, bad shadow actions have started to develop as a consequence. So for example, let's say you have this shadow trait as a kid, right? Maybe you're competitive. And that could be a good thing as a kid. Maybe you learn to play sports, or you like to play, or you win things, whatever. But social conditioning tells you that competition is bad, and everybody around you tells you need to calm down, whatever it is. So then you repress it. As you repress it, like I said, you can't fully repress these traits. So a bad shadow action develops. So for example, let's say you start to hate people, or you start to bring others down or talk others down that are succeeding because you yourself are competitive and wish you yourself were succeeding in those areas. And that leads to a lack of fulfillment. It leads to a lack of integration, a lack of balance in your life. You're just like everyone else. I'll give you two personal examples of how I've improperly done shadow integration in my life. Basically just how I was like everybody else. So my shadow trait as a kid would be my desire to be recognized for something challenging. Remember, a shadow trait is anything that's repressed. It's not necessarily just dark things. You can repress good things. It's just anything that's repressed. So my shadow trait for my desire to be recognized for something challenging turned into a good shadow action. Interest in arts, writing and music, whatever. Then comes social conditioning, school, parents, and society says that my dreams are unrealistic and that those interests make no money. So then comes repression. I have to fit in with society, so I repress those thoughts and I stop pursuing my dreams. But just like energy can't be created or destroyed, that energy transfers into a bad shadow action, and that is wasting my time trying to be a doctor. And I was resentful towards those who led me here, towards the people of authority, towards teachers, towards my parents. That is a perfect example of an improper shadow integration. Another example of this would be my desire for power. So this was the trait I had, and it turned into a good action at first. I got involved in school leadership, I became president like I said, but then society says that those in power are corrupt and they're greedy and evil and they only want control. So I repressed those behaviors, became a follower instead of a leader, and achieved nothing, which then led to the bad shadow action of resentment towards those in charge. So those are the improper shadow integrations. Now we're going to go over how to properly integrate the shadow. This is where you'll get ahead of 99% of people. Anyone can incorporate their shadow. That's what prisoners, murderers, and thieves do. The real challenge is the ability to channel that energy for a greater good, for the benefit of society. So step one to a proper shadow integration is going to be to set your ego aside. This is like a foundational rule one that we need to do first. You must be willing to accept that you have flaws and dark traits. You need to realize that all humans have the true capacity for evil. Without this realization, you will not be able to progress forward. You need to be honest with yourself. The second step is identifying the parts of your shadow. For me, it was a desire to achieve something great. I have hyper competitiveness, I have aggression and lust, and even a desire for fame and status. You need to identify these traits, and you do this through self-reflection, journaling, meditation, reading about this, watching videos like this, and seeking truth. The third and last step of a proper shadow integration is you need to use these traits in your everyday life, but for the purpose of good, aka channeling. So here's what that looks like. Now that you're becoming aware of your dark personality traits and how they developed over time, it's time to channel that energy into something good. And by correctly channeling these shadow behaviors into something good, you will get ahead of 99% of people. Most people operate unaware of their bad behaviors and how they can use that energy to maximize progress forward. So I'm gonna use the examples I gave you before and what they look like now with proper shadow integration so you can do the same thing. So we're gonna start with my desire to achieve something great. That is something I've always repressed, like the desire to do something challenging, being known for something challenging. So I embraced this by quite literally quitting my job with no other place to go, no money coming in, to go full-time on this business and YouTube. This is giving me a sense of purpose and fulfillment. The more I work, the more I feel fulfilled, and the more money I make. And using the hyper-competitiveness trait from earlier, instead of tearing others down or becoming envious, I use that energy to try and achieve the best work possible. I try and perfect my craft, my videos, my tweets, whatever, my writing. And this also results in an infinite feedback loop. The more competitive I am, the better my work becomes, which leads to me feeling more fulfilled and in return, more money. You see, most people think that the answer to success and fulfillment is outside of them, that it's something they need to obtain or get a hold of. But I would actually say the opposite. You can't think that you're more than human and that you are in control of your desires and that you could never be bad and that you know everything that you're doing, because that is simply not the case. If there's one thing I want you to take from this video, it's this. Most people don't succeed in life because they don't look inward enough. They aren't honest with themselves and they aren't aware of themselves. Your lack of success is 100% your fault. But there is some good news here. The answer to your problems is also inside of you. You just have to look. All you have to do is realize what's holding you back and channeling that energy in the opposite direction. And you can do this by following the 3 steps of integration mentioned earlier. Drop your ego and accept that you're flawed. Identify which behaviors and traits are holding you back. You can do this through self-reflection, journaling, meditation, prayer, and seeking the truth. Third, incorporate those traits in your everyday life, aka channeling that negative energy into positive energy. Now this video is densely packed, and I'm going to dive deeper into each one of these subjects in more videos. I recommend coming back to watch certain parts of this video so you can stop being held back in your life by your habits and beliefs that have been conditioned into you by society, which are preventing you from progressing forward. All you need is self-awareness. If you're interested in this topic and other topics like this and would like to learn more and dive deeper, you can join my free school community down below in the description. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.